Her Sport Rugby Show, brought to you by Energia. Think of the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Her Sport's Interpro Rugby Show, brought to you in association with Energia. Think of the possibilities. My name is Alannah Cunnane and today I'm joined by Hannah Tyrell to bring you through the final round of action, round 3, where Munster reigned victorious once again for the second year running. How do you think of that, Hannah, first off?
Obviously we knew coming into this weekend that it was Munster's title to lose, and that on paper going into it they looked like the stronger side, and that it was, barring an upset elsewhere, that they were going to, take this title. And in fairness to them, looking back over the 3 games and at all provinces, they have been the best and most consistent team. In all 3 games they got a bonus point, and just their strength and depth has been key, and they looked like a very well coached side, and that's going to happen when you have the likes of Fee Hayes and Niamh Briggs on the sideline. But fair dues to them. First time they've done back-to-back since 2015, and last year when they beat Leinster were going for 3 in a row. So to be able to back that up really shows how much they're developing, female rugby players down in Munster, and they were worthy winners.
2 on the bounce now for them, as you say. Do you think there's a bit of a reign of dominance coming in there, or will Leinster disrupt things maybe once again?
With my Leinster hat on, obviously, I'm hoping that that's not the case, no. But look, looking at it from an objective view, they were the best team in the tournament this year. Leinster did give them a good run of it, and it's probably unfortunate that when Leinster and Munster did play, that Leinster didn't have their best game of rugby and had a lot of their own mistakes. So I would have loved to seen them play another game against each other, really, to see where we're at. But Munster certainly have all the qualities and the depth there to go on a run and win this Interpros again next year. But I've no doubt not just Leinster, but Munster and Ulster will be looking to shake things up a little bit.
That's kind of the downside, isn't it, of not having that showpiece final like we had mentioned last week. But as we mentioned throughout the tournament, there's been a lot of young talent shining through, but there's also been a few retirements since the conclusion of the Interpros there. We had Ilse van Staden from Ulster, Mary Healy, Mairead Coyne and Laura Feely from Connacht. Definitely made an impact on Irish rugby anyways.
Yeah, look, and I've been lucky enough to play with all 4 of those in a green jersey, and these girls have been playing rugby for a very long time, and it's a big commitment, not just playing for Ireland but also playing for your province. And particularly some of those girls, like Laura Feely lives in Dublin, and she's been trekking out to Connacht for training the last couple of months, and that does take a toll physically, but emotionally it can be an awful lot, and you give up so much. I think people probably don't realise from the outside how big a commitment it is, and while it's amazing to have that opportunity to play for your province or for your country, that the sacrifices you make on top of that, and what you miss because you have to go rugby training or you have to go play a match, and they've just realised that at this point they maybe have no more left to give, and they can't give 100% commitment like they're used to, and fair play to them. For Connacht it's a massive blow to lose those 3. Like Laura Feely has been a linchpin of their scrum, Mary Healy's I think been their 9 for a very long time, and that, for them, having that stability there has been massive for them, and Mairead Coyne at fullback. So they've had a good crew there, being able to kind of bring in those young ones along. So next year they'll have big boots to fill. And you look up at Ulster, Ilse van Staden's been there for a very, very long time. She's a South African. She moved here quite a long time ago now, and she's very much an Ulster woman, and a proud Ulster woman at that. But she's given so much, and for her it's just commitment. She's a young family, she has her own business, and fair play to them for that. But yeah, it'll be sad to see them go, and both those provinces, and I'm sure we'll see other retirements or losses for whatever reason over the next couple of months. But there's opportunities there for other people. When you get retirements, yes, it's hard to see them go, but there's an opportunity there for someone else to stake a claim for that jersey and try and improve their province.
I'd say it's kind of hard to say goodbye as well, because you could even see post-match, especially in the Connacht game, you could see kind of how emotional, how much it means to the players as well.
Yeah, look, it is. When it's something you've been part of for so long, and you're leaving these teammates behind and stuff like that, it can be hard to let go. But I think what's nice for those girls is that they knew coming into it was their last season, their last game, and they were able to go out on their own terms, which is a really, really nice thing. And I'm sure they're very grateful for, because there's a lot of players who unfortunately played their last game without ever realising they played their last game, either, you know, weren't selected again or out of form, or unfortunately injury curtails them. So for those guys to be able to go out on their own, you know, making their own decision, it is a really special thing for them, and look, they'll look back on their careers with very fond memories, I'm sure.
And just at the end of January now, and a few weeks away from the Six Nations, the Celtic Cup to come yet, but how have you found the change in format with the Interpros during this time period as opposed to in the summer like it was before?
Yeah, so obviously this year there's been a lot of change. You know, we saw a change with the AIL structure being cut short, the Interpros being moved here to January, and we've seen, unfortunately, less games. So that's one thing I think, and I've heard from a lot of coaches, is they wish they had another round of games so that everybody got to play home and away, because one, it's great for all these girls to gain that experience being part of this team, but also teams get better the more they play. And as I said, I would have loved to see Leinster, Munster play again to really see where both teams are at. I think it's a great way to build into this Celtic Cup and give players an opportunity to put their hand up for the Celtic Cup and then therefore for the Six Nations. But I'm sure the players will agree with me that the weather at this time of the year is not the most suitable for rugby, you know, and we were lucky enough down in Musgrave Park. It's an Astro, so there was never actually an issue with pitches, but I know there was a pitch inspection at the weekend before the Leinster-Ulster game, and potentially that game could have been called off. But as a former winger myself, you know, I know the wet and windy, cold days are not ideal for playing rugby. And, you know, if this had been played in drier conditions in the summer, and not that we were guaranteed dry conditions in the summer, would we have maybe seen an even better standards than we have? But I do like the idea of it, being able to, off the back of the AIL, players get rewarded for that form by going to province, and then rewarded for their provincial form by going into this combined provinces squad, and then again from that hopefully into a green jersey for Ireland.
And you'd imagine that decision was made with a view to kind of competitive high level rugby before the Six Nations. Are you hopeful like that'd be the case?
Yeah, look, I definitely think that was the decision making behind it, that this is where we can fit these fixtures in, and that it's a step up from AIL, so that when we get to international standard we're not like a little bit behind or kind of caught cold. So that is a good thing, because it can be quite a jump to go from AIL level rugby to international rugby. So to have that in between has been great. But look, a lot of players have put their hands up from the Interprovincial series. You know, some of them been rewarded with spots in the combined provinces squad. And I've no doubt then some of them will be seeing them in the Six Nations come March.
Yeah, so moving on, first of all, we'll review the weekend's matches before we jump into a preview of the Celtic Cup we had mentioned there. Munster and Connacht, the first game of the day, which kind of had it called off, I guess, by the time the second game came around, but 50-24 tries for Alannah McInerney, Clodagh O'Halloran, Dervla Nicavard, Roisin Ormond, Ailish Cahill, Rachel Allen, Heather Kennedy, and helped along by conversions by Nicole Cronin. It's a long list there, Hannah. They were unplayable on Saturday.
Yeah, look, obviously when any team puts down 50 points, you know, they've had a good day, and I actually think that Munster left a couple of opportunities out there for more, but they scored 8 tries. You know, as I mentioned earlier, they got the bonus point very early on, but for me, it just massively showed their strength and depth. They had a little bit of a slow start and kind of get their feet. Connacht came out strong, and I thought this would be a really great battle here, but unfortunately for Connacht, Munster were too powerful. And what I loved about this Munster team is that we've seen all tournament that they've relied on their bench an awful lot, and like early on losing Enya Breen, they had to rely on their strength and depth a little bit. Before those eight tries came from their subs, you know, Ailish Cahill got 2, Rachel Allen got 1, and Heather Kennedy from Ballincollig got another as well. And like, to have that ability to bring off players who are going to get you tries is fantastic, and it means that they're obviously getting valuable game time, they're gaining in confidence, and that whole squad unity and belief in the squad as a whole just massively rises. And if there had been more games and potentially an injury, you know that you have a suitable replacement who's up to the standard and is well able to finish out a game. And I think that's been Munster's strong point, is that finishing out games. They've done really, really well. We saw it in the Ulster game. Derv Nicavard got a late try. In the Leinster game to kill it off, Stephanie Carroll scored. You know, and to have 4 subs at the weekend score tries, or sorry, 3 subs and get 4 tries at the weekend is incredible. And the work that Niamh Briggs and Fiona Hayes are doing behind the scenes is really, really good for women's rugby in Munster. And, you know, it's fantastic to see that outcome. From a Connacht perspective, there's a lot of positives to take, a couple of negatives as well, but I just really thought that their desire, even when they were out of the game a little bit, their desire to keep scoring tries and keep pushing Munster back, you know, and showing what they can do was fantastic. You know, and again, we saw Clara Barrett, we talked about her now the last couple of weeks. She got 2 tries, and one of them was a lovely crossfield kick by Nicole Fowley, which is obviously her main strength. But for them, they also relied on their subs to have a big impact, and 2 of their subs, their 2 front rowers, got fantastic individual tries from quick taps and goes that kind of caught Munster on the hop a little bit. I just wish we had seen that a bit sooner, and that kind of intensity and quick thinking from Connacht a little bit sooner to kind of really get Munster thinking about it defensively.
And then you had mentioned there the fight that you could see in Munster. I know Greg McWilliams, Ireland coach, had tweeted that Munster are an excellent team. They're well coached. He's impressed by the cohesion and delighted for his old pals, Niamh Briggs and Fiona Hayes. They'll be looking to tap into a bit of that fight and determination come the Ireland Six Nations.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, obviously, nothing on Greg. I think he's always going to congratulate Niamh Briggs, considering she's one of his assistant coaches. You know, he's always going to be like, yeah, picked her for a reason. But look, she's a winning coach, and like, you know, fair play to her. But she'll hopefully bring some of that into the Ireland squad. But yeah, look, this combined provinces that we're going to see and the Six Nations squad, a whole thing around the Irish identity with rugby is our fight, you know, and our heart and our desire to win every loose ball, give 100% every time, and regardless of the scoreline, you know, put our bodies on the line. And I suppose Munster showed that, and they're a very resilient team, you know, and there's a couple of their players will be in the squad over the next couple of weeks, and we'll get to see a lot more of them, which is hugely exciting for them. And yeah, we'll see what they'll bring.
And obviously, you kind of touched on it there, but Niamh Briggs and Fiona Hayes, their first kind of fully involvement in that coaching ticket, it didn't go too bad for them. Do you think there's a value there in those ex-players being involved in that capacity?
Absolutely. When you look at that, the experience they've had, you know, like both Irish internationals, Niamh Briggs, former captain of Ireland, she's currently in the Irish setup, like, you know, she's clearly doing something right, and people are liking what they're seeing from her, but she knows the game. And Fee Hayes, you know, she was a prop, she has massive knowledge of the scrum, and she's there, you know, being able to train and coach these youngsters in about all the skills and tools and trades of the scrum, which I know absolutely nothing about, and I'm sure Niamh Briggs doesn't either, really. But yeah, look, their knowledge is invaluable. They've been there, they've done that, and they can just try coach the next generation, and you can see that coming through with the number of players that they have that are really stepping up. And look, I'd love to see more female coaches, both at AIL level, but also at provincial and international level. And Fee Hayes, head coach of Ballincollig, you know, Briggsy was with UL Bows this year, and now Munster in Ireland. Like, why not? Let's see more of it.
I have a big one for you now. Tyrell and Alannah, player of the match in that one. Was she your player of the tournament, or who are your picks for that?
Yeah, no, look, I actually think Derv was the standout player of the tournament, and by a mile. And you know, next closest one to her is probably Maeve O'Leary, and that tells you a lot about the strength and depth that Munster have at back row. And I'm not even mentioning someone like Dorothy Wall, you know. But Derv Nicovar's been a revelation. You know, she's been out. I feel like I'm constantly just talking about her, but when you keep putting in performances like that, you deserve a mention.
Yeah.
You know, and I know there's a whole pack there and the whole team are doing a great job, but she is just the talismanic leader for them. Her form came good in the AIL, player of the match in the first game, could have gotten player of the match in the second game too, she was that good. But I think in this game at the weekend, deserved player of the match. Her try in the first half is just so like talismanic in that she has everything as an 8, probably lacking in size a small bit, but for me that wouldn't worry me at all. You know, she can jump in the line out, she can throw in the line out if you want her to, she's so versatile, but she has speed, she has footwork, and she has this doggedness, determination that she's not going to go down, and that shows in that first try that she gets at the weekend, where she gets the ball in her own half and goes around 2 or 3 people, and she's tacklers hanging off her and just will not go down, and has that burst of speed to get away. But she can do it on both sides of the ball, and I think she'll be a great addition to the squad this year. And for me, she should be in that Ireland squad, no doubt, and she gets a chance in the combined provinces to do that. But yeah, she's been fantastic, and something maybe that Ireland have been missing a little bit in the back row.
I'm sure maybe we'll be looking to utilise that a bit then. But you touched on there how phenomenal the back row have been for Munster. Any other kind of honourable mentions from the other provinces as to who you think was their player of the tournament?
Does it have to be back row?
No, sorry.
Do you know what? I will say that I thought Jenny Murphy really stepped up for Leinster this year. Hasn't been involved with Ireland for the last number of years, but like still has so much to give and has been doing it with Old Belvedere. But she got a couple of tries in the first 2 games, and she's just been a massive leader. But not only that, like she'd be someone who is very, very good at integrating younger players into the squad. Like she's a great character outside the squad, really, really funny, and her performances on the pitch have been fantastic, and I'm sure for Tanya Rosser it's been brilliant to have someone of her calibre in there. So yeah, she'd be for me kind of someone who's done really, really well.
Tanya Rosser was actually in the media this week kind of echoing exactly what you just said and how she's such a great leader, and she'd love to see her back in the Ireland squad, so maybe that's something we'll keep an eye on. But moving on then to Leinster-Ulster, as we say, 43-0, but it was kind of gone for them by the time that one rolled around. That had to have been hard to kind of rise to it and still put on a good performance.
Yeah, look, obviously, and that's maybe another thing with the fixtures and scheduling. Like, it would have been great to have them on at the same time, so you kind of didn't really know who was going to win it or whatever else. But I also understand that we want to have as many eyes as possible on both games, and by scheduling them at different times, we could both watch both and whatever else. But yeah, it was a tough one to take, I'm sure. But Leinster know, how professional Munster are in their setup and everything else, and they would have known that they were going out to do a job, and regardless of what happens there, they wanted to go out and do a win and try and put to bed the defeat of last week, and they did just that. Regardless of the result of the Munster game, they wanted to put in a performance that they could be proud of, and that's what the girls were all saying in the build up to the week. But look, fairly comprehensive 43-0 win. Hannah O'Connor, who I felt was a little bit quiet in the Munster game, again up against a really strong back row. She put all the doubters to bed there with a hat-trick display, and I'm sure she was absolutely delighted with that. But yeah, a very, very dominant performance from Leinster, and one they could be proud of to finish the tournament, but they'll be looking to come back next year and take that title from Munster.
Pity, as you say, that we didn't get that final game to really rise the stakes, I guess. But do you think they're close, and will they feel that that's one they left behind them maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying earlier, that Munster-Leinster game, scoreline probably didn't reflect how tight it was, considering Munster got that try right at the end, kind of make it more than a 1-score game. But it was a fairly tight contest, and I do think Leinster and Munster would be fairly evenly matched. Unfortunately, on the day, Munster just played a lot better and didn't have as many mistakes, whereas Leinster really didn't help themselves with a lot of the mistakes and turnovers they had. And I would have loved to see, as I mentioned, another game where they played a little bit better, because I do think these are very evenly matched, and next year I wouldn't be going in saying that this is Munster's title, that it's up in the air, and that's the beauty of sport, that anything can happen regardless of who you think is a given to win.
And on the other side of the spectrum then, Ulster, has to be tough for them going with, through the tournament without a win. Back to the drawing board there, and what do you think they need to kind of switch up?
Yeah, look, Ulster always knew coming into this tournament was going to be tough. They came in fairly positively and felt like they'd done a really good bank of work, and were really looking forward to the tournament. But unfortunately, when you go 2 games without scoring, that's something that you really need to work on. And I really admired their doggedness, and the defence they had at times was absolutely fantastic. But their attacking options were severely lacking, and unfortunately couldn't break down the really good defence of other teams. And it's a tough day for them. They do have some really good players, like I've mentioned before. I'm really, really impressed with Ella Durkin, and I'm really excited to see how she goes and develops as a player. And Maeve Liston has been fantastic for them too. But it's just hard for them, as I was saying. Ulster Rugby, there is only one female AIL club up there. I would love to see more clubs up there to get more girls interested and really help with their depth. But it's tough. There is a little bit of a gap there, and I would love to see them come out next year and get a win. And their focus this year would have been the Connacht game, and it was such a tight game, and it was very, very close, but they weren't really in this game at all, unfortunately. And look, it's one of those where some of them will take a little bit of a break and then go back to the drawing board and see what they can do for next year.
For now, though, as we alluded to earlier, the Celtic Cup to come now. Just for those who don't know, maybe a brief explanation of that, Hannah.
Yeah, so the RFU have told us that it's going to be where we play 4 games. So we'll play 2 games against the Welsh and 2 games against the Scottish, and we'll have 2 of those at home up in Ulster in Kingspan, and it's a combined provinces, as they're calling it, in Ireland, and I presume will be the same in Wales and in Scotland. And it's just basically almost like an international kind of setup where we're giving players the opportunity to see can they make that next step up. And there'll be players in this combined provinces squad who will go on and play for Ireland, or who have already played for Ireland, and they'll be kind of looked towards as leaders for this squad. But there's a lot of girls in here who might be getting their first taste of international rugby, or kind of the standards expected of international rugby, and it's to just get them have a feel of what's going on, and certain calls and plays and the way that Greg wants his Irish team to play. And as I said, it's just an opportunity for them to play more rugby, show what they can do, and there's not really a lot of pressure like there would be in the Six Nations. So that'll be played over the next couple of weeks, and it'll be really interesting to see who gets those opportunities and who takes those opportunities. And
it's the inaugural year of the tournament, as you mentioned, where Ireland are referred to as the combined 15. That's because, is this fair to say, I'm imagining it is anyways, that we're without our players that play overseas, and it's homegrown Interpros players and beyond AIL as well.
Yeah, so what we've seen from the squad selection is out of, I think it's 42 or 43 players, none that play abroad have been selected for this, because they are playing in either England or elsewhere, and are getting plenty of rugby here. So this is an opportunity for others, who have been playing well in the AIL and in the Interpros to step up and get a chance. And again, this is another opportunity for Ireland as a whole to improve our squad depth. As I said, some of this will be the furthest they'll get, and they'll go back to their clubs as better players and a better understanding of the game and the way Greg wants to play. But that's improving our squad depth all the time. Like, they may not be considered now, but all of a sudden during the Six Nations an injury happens and they get called up, and instead of being called up out of the blue and not having any idea of standards or protocols or calls or anything else, they'll go, okay, we've done this a couple of weeks ago, so I know this, and they're not starting from scratch, and it helps Ireland. And it's just a building process, and it's a pathway, and it's a great idea to see. And as I said, I've been saying all the time, we just want to see them play more rugby, because the more you play, the better you get.
There has been a bit of confusion though when it comes to squad selection. 8 players from Munster, who we were talking about just after won the Interpros for the 2nd year in a row, and then Leinster have 21 players, Ulster 10, Connacht 4. What do you think the selection process has been there, and is it more so about development going off that kind of basis?
Yeah, look, it was an intriguing one, and we kind of got no explanation, behind the squad selection. So we weren't told, certain players weren't picked because of whatever reason, or it is a strange one. Munster have been fantastic, and for them to only have 8 players, I know Fiona Hayes expressed her disappointment with that earlier on, because she felt like, we should be rewarding on form, and that the best players in those positions should be being picked. Looking at it from another perspective, just because your team is the winning team doesn't mean that you have the best player in that position per se. But when you see 21 from Leinster and only 8 from Munster, and then 10 from Ulster, and you are kind of wondering a little bit, what were these selections based on? And another thing, there's a lot of players within that squad who weren't even involved in the Interpros, and therefore that's kind of like a head scratcher. Again, we don't know the thinking behind this or anything else. I know that a couple there were injured, so Maeve Deely has been included. She's been unavailable for selection the last couple of weeks. Brittany Hogan from Ulster, also selected, wasn't available for the Interpros. Natasha Behan was away with Sevens in New Zealand last week. She has been named. So they're kind of outliers in that, where you're like, fair enough.
Get some minutes under the belt.
Exactly. And someone like Linda Jugang, who has been away in the Cayman Islands, hasn't played an awful lot of rugby, so they're looking for that. And I'm sure if they had been available for the Interpros, they would have been picked. So that's, Then there's other players, like you look at Jenny Murphy playing really, really well in the Interpros, has not been picked. Again, is that a decision from her end that she doesn't want to be involved, like what has happened when she stepped away from Ireland? Or is Greg looking towards the future and developing younger players who potentially have a much longer career in a green jersey down the line? Again, we have been given no inference in whether that's true or not. There are a couple of players that are quite baffling in my opinion, and I'm not saying it's the right one, but just that there are a couple of Leinster players who were within the Leinster squad or wider squad range but didn't actually play any minutes for Leinster, and yet they're included in this combined provinces squad. And that is a strange one and a head scratcher, because my feeling is if you aren't in good form, and this doesn't mean you're not a good rugby player, it just might mean right now in form you haven't been picked in a 23 across the 3 games, how do you get into a combined provinces squad? You know, because
especially if the thinking in the first place was sort of marked out as if this is a continuing on before the Six Nations, get some competitive rugby.
And get rewarding that form and giving people who have played well opportunities to see can they step up. You know, so if you can't get a game for your province or you can't get any minutes, I don't understand how you can be picked for the combined provinces. And this is nothing on the players. They're not picking the squad, you know. Greg obviously has his own thoughts about this, and there might be other reasons why that we don't know about. But looking from the outside, it is a strange one to see certain players who have not been picked and seemingly are not injured during the Interpros, and yet being picked for combined colleges over other, or combined provinces, over other players who have played in the Interpros. That it's just a strange one, and I'm sure when we see it, the team named this weekend for this weekend's game against Wales, we'll get a bit more of an insight, and maybe we'll get an interview or two from Greg kind of explaining his thought process and selection decisions. But right now we're in the dark a little bit, but it's unusual. But I am delighted to see certain players. I think it'll be great to see Clara Barrett, see can she step up. Derv Nicovard, as I mentioned. Dana O'Brien at 10, and we already know she's played for Ireland before, but she just needs to play more and more in that 10 role. I think it'd be great for her, you know, and then a load of other players brought in there just need a bit of game time and get them up to speed again.
Do you think there'll be the same level as intrigue in these matches? You know, there's a bit of momentum there now off the back of the Interpros. There was quite a lot of people at the stadiums and at the games, and then watching along on TG Ceathair and BBC. We have, as you mentioned, the Wales game this Sunday, 29th of January, Scotland then the Saturday the 4th, Wales again February 18th, and then Scotland finally Saturday the 25th.
Yeah, look, I would hope so. You know, people's kind of heads have been turned a little bit with some of these Interpros. A lot of people who I know wouldn't be mad about rugby kind of were particularly watching the Leinster-Munster game and saying there was some fantastic rugby on show, you know, and then they were tuning in last week because of that, which is great. You know, so hopefully they continue to keep an eye on it and keep supporting it, and that gets more people then to games, either in the Kingspan or for the Six Nations down in Musgrave Park. But yeah, look, we want to keep the media on it about it and get people get this sport as visible as possible, you know. And this is a new tournament, so I think a lot of people will be intrigued and interested to see how it goes and how the format goes and what selection Greg plays and how people play. So yeah, I think it's great that it's kind of an on-running thing, and as soon as the Celtic Cup is done, we'll be practically into the Six Nations, where everyone will be hopefully on a buzz after the men winning, and we can, you know, kick on from there.
Something that has garnered a lot of media attention over the last day or two is the jersey and the opinions on it. What do you think about it?
My first thought was, wow, that is ugly. I'm not going to lie, it definitely stands out. Like, so obviously each province's colour is represented, and so it gives you that kind of Joker feel of it. I wouldn't be desperate now to buy one, but you know, for a lot of these players, this is as good as an international jersey for them, so they will be. But I have seen some people are like, yes, absolutely, and it is very much a change. I think I was just taken aback because you're so used to the all green or the all white or even a little bit of navy that is just, for me, a hodgepodge of colours that it looks a bit strange to be an Irish jersey per se, or a combined provinces. But look, if someone was to give me one, sure, I'd wear it.
There's odds of a half GA jersey in.
Oh no, I'm not for the half and halves.
Finally then, looking forward, as we mentioned, we have the Interpros, now we're into this Celtic Cup, and then we'll finish off with the Six Nations. How do you imagine this will prepare Ireland for the Six Nations and see us getting on there?
Yeah, look, obviously it's been a big year for women's rugby in Ireland. You know, the introduction of contracts, and there was a bit of furore over last year, and we've been one of the last teams to do it. And you know, I do think the contracts are a good step, and we've 29 contracted players involved, and I do think they'll have been improving, but I don't think we can expect massive improvements overnight. And this year in particular, because we always like to focus on our home games, this year our home games are England and France, and they are particularly tough because for me there is a gap there between England and France and the rest of the teams in the Six Nations. So this will be a particularly difficult year, but I do think Ireland can make that target of 3 away wins against Wales, Scotland and Italy, and that is something that is very feasible. You know, obviously hopefully we'll have a full squad to pick from come the Six Nations, and that between the girls playing over in the Premier 15s in England and contracted players here from the Interpros and the AIL, that our level has gone up a little bit so that we can close that gap a little bit against England and France. And speaking to Fee Hayes during the week at the launch of the Six Nations, she was saying that she thinks Ireland could spring a surprise against England and France, and it's a very valid point that Ireland are the only team who wasn't at the World Cup, and so other teams will be going through a World Cup cycle, and a lot of players from England and France have retired at the back of that. And so if any year is a year for us to do really well, it's this year, because we probably didn't have that same cycle of players retiring off the back of a World Cup, whereas England have lost a few, France have lost a few. So there's a potential to spring a surprise against one of those two teams. Personally, I can't see it happening. I would dearly love it to happen, absolutely. But improvements on those two performances from last year would be great, and then three away wins I think we'd be very, very happy with.
Well, we'll look forward to it anyways with eager anticipation. That's it for this week's Her Sport Interpro Rugby Show, brought to you in association with Energia. Think of the possibilities. I've been Alannah Cunnane, this has been Hannah Tyrell. Thank you very much for your insights over the course of the Interpros as well as the AIL and the entire series overall. But this has been the Her Sport Interpro Rugby Show. We'll see you soon.
Her Sports Rugby Show, brought to you by Energia. Think of the possibilities.